welcome back to Georgina Life. So, what does trauma look like? It could have many faces, and here to describe, talk about, and elucidate us on all trauma.
That's a big word for a Monday.
Is Pamela Robinson, spiritual coach, mentor,
Life
everything.
Coach,
Oh my gosh.
All kinds of
Thankfully,
labels.
we have you here.
Therapist,
Welcome to Georgina Life.
Thank you very much.
So
Thank you for having me.
what does trauma look like? It looks different.
Well,
to some
everybody
people.
thinks that trauma is like a worst case scenario
Yes.
or an event, right? Like that's what we've been taught.
Yes.
But trauma, I believe, is anything that leaves a scar on our self-esteem.
Oh.
So,
That's interesting.
So as a child, it's all of those little things, children are seen and not heard, the cuff in the back of the head, those little things that...
Welcome to our childhood.
Well, it sounds funny because it's common things, but depending on the child, what scars their self-esteem is very different. Very different.
Yes.
So it's that being able to identify as an adult, it shows up in ways like being overprotective.
Oh.
Right? It shows up in being avoidant in your life. And I know there's a list that will be shown of the various ways.
Wow.
So it's being able to understand that it shows up. Yeah, there's the lovely list. So it shows up in various ways depending on the person. So it's helping people to understand, okay, what does that look like for you? One of the big things is when children are acting up in this day and age and parents are really frustrated because their children aren't learning from them, right? Mm-hmm. It's that element of, as a child, they're being triggered because they knew they had to listen. So why aren't my children listening to me? Because I had to listen to my parents. So it shows up in a lot of really what seems insignificant, but until you actually get to the root, you won't change the dynamic. It'll still be that, going at things the same way, adding more frustration, and those expectations on children. In this day and age, children are teaching a lot of lessons because they are more in tune with themselves.
Yes. Well, and I've said many times in the opportunities that I've had to work with children and youth and their parents, it's lovely that you think you're listening, but are you actually hearing what your children are saying?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely accurate.
It's just the whole. But I think, and we spoke about this too, I certainly have had an interesting childhood being raised by a single mom in the 50s and the 60s, so everything we've talked about over the many shows.
Yes.
Welcome to my life. But you hear the word trauma and automatically I think there's a sense of panic. It's like it's got to be something horrific.
Yeah, catastrophic.
And what I'm hearing you say today is not necessarily so as we would define
as it's been defined for us growing up.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what's really lovely is when you start to look at these things, and it takes someone getting into their adult life to start to look at these things because we're not taught to question anything in any capacity, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
So we're born into a family construct, and I think I've spoke to this before, right, of beliefs, values, morals. And so what's happening is that when we start to question that, that's when change will start to happen. Now, there's three things that will actually create that change. It will be either another form of trauma where you show up differently.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Gosh.
So you start to stand up for yourself, right? Then you start to believe in yourself. Hypnosis is another way, or an authority figure.
Oh, boy.
So those are the only three ways that change can actually happen.
And you know what? I have to stop you right there, but you are going to come back at the end of the show. We're going to talk more about trauma. So all of you at home, don't go anywhere because we have so much more on Georgina Life. And you know what? Stay with us.
Welcome back, Georgina. As promised, we are joined once again by Pamela Robinson, spiritual teacher, life coach, and mentor to just build on that conversation around trauma, because we just scraped the surface. So I'm so glad that you're here with us in our closing chat.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, great conversation.
Yes.
There's just so much to ask because, you know, you talk, well, we talked about how people, when you say trauma, they think, oh gosh, this major, huge, life-altering experience. Right?
Yeah.
And usually it's experience.
It's
one.
It's actually the built-up mini T's, the
There you
mini
go.
traumas,
Okay.
right?
There you go.
Compounded, especially in childhood, because our subconscious takes in all of the information, right? I call it our data bank by the time we're 5.
Right.
And then and then there's what's called the critical factor, which is the gatekeepers. So as we're going out into the real world, what happens is that the information that comes to us, the gatekeepers, the critical factors, checking to see if it matches what's in our data bank. So if you get a compliment as a child after having low self-esteem because of what's in that data bank, the gatekeepers will reject it.
Oh, yes.
So that's why it takes so long, or takes an authority, counseling, you know. And it's not that somebody is an authority and tells you, hey, this is the way it's going to be. It takes that work to uncover and unravel, right? So that's why the authority aspect. Hypnosis is a quick and easy way,
Right.
because it clears and you're doing the work. It's not somebody else doing the work for you, right? There's some power of suggestion, but people think hypnosis is you're out of it. No, you're not. You're in full control. It's not like how they show on Hollywood, right?
Well,
No.
yes, it's not Las Vegas.
So even people who have lived in a home where there's arguments, the arguments may not have been bad, but what has it done to that child, right? And then they continue on doing the same behavior. Now you can have 3 kids in the family. One child it will affect as a trauma. Another child it might not.
And I must say to you, I have it in my own family. My husband and brother-in-law have 2 very different pictures of the home they grew up in.
Absolutely.
Which just amazes me. I just, like, how does that even happen?
And I believe that just is because our data bank, our subconscious, is what develops our personality, right?
Yeah.
So every person comes into a family construct of values, morals, beliefs. And back in the day, we were taught we're supposed to think the same way, vote the same way, be the same way. Until we get into our adult life and then we start to question things. I think teenagers actually, they start to do that, even though they come off as rebellious. That's when they're starting to develop their own values, beliefs, right? But everybody judges it, that, oh my God, they're doing something wrong.
So that's the fight against what we've been told we must.
Absolutely. So again, adds to more trauma, right? More effects on the self-esteem.
Wow. So when you talk to certain people, as even myself, about, you know, those repeating patterns of behavior that happen in our lives, that could be due to like a trauma response situation?
Absolutely. It's what we know. Survival mode.
Do what you know.
Do what you know.
Oh boy, that's terrifying.
Well, it's safe.
Absolutely.
To some
It's
degree,
safe from a familiar, comfortable place, not from, oh God, it feels great.
Yes.
But I know how to operate in that.
That's really interesting.
So is it, oh my God, this is way too close to home for me, but is sometimes just sort of going with what you know a bit of a default because we don't want to address what we should?
Absolutely,
perhaps?
it is a default.
Darn.
Absolutely. We go back to what we know. That's why a lot of things that people will work through with different modalities, it doesn't work because when backed into a corner, you go to that default. So until that is healed, we change the message in your subconscious. Some people will continue that pattern for the rest of their life. But the ones that are brave enough to do the work, inner child work, hypnosis, whatever you want to call it, there's different names we can call it. They're the ones that are now breaking generational traumas that have been passed along, generational patterns of behavior. Even someone who's been abused, they will either make a choice, right? So that trauma helped them in their subconscious to make the choice that I'm not going to do that. But some people fall back into the same pattern of behavior because it's familiar. They know how to operate in it.
Oh, I like that. See, that
makes sense.
That makes sense.
It's almost
I know
normalized.
how to operate.
It's almost normalized as well, but so the subconscious receives that,
right?
But it doesn't receive the same message as the other person. So again, it's an individual thing, and that for me is the spiritual aspect. What are we here to learn?
Right.
What are we here to, on a soul level, change?
Well, okay, so how does one even begin that journey? Because it is a journey, obviously. But how does somebody begin?
I think from what I've learned and seen is that everybody starts to question themselves a little bit, questions what's going on in the world, going, oh my God, this keeps happening over and over.
Yeah.
And when they start to take responsibility, if you continue to blame the world around you,
Yes.
you're not going to heal, you're not going to make the change. And trauma just shines a light on what needs to heal so that you can become who you're meant to be.
Oh boy. But
So-
you have to be willing to do the work.
Absolutely.
And that's a problem because some people don't want to face that particular, or those traumas,
Well,
those
there's-
little T's.
That's right, because they'll minimize the effect on themselves. They don't want to make out that their parents were bad people. And it's not about making anyone bad.
Thank you. It's not. I mean, I was raised by a single mom, and that parenting, by today's standards, would horrify people.
Absolutely.
But was I abused? No. My mother did the very best she could with the tools she had. As you as a new mom, you didn't. No one handed you a book.
Oh gosh.
No,
So-
absolutely right. So it's not to, so people don't want to look at that element because they don't want to look badly on their family. They don't like the feeling of it. It's not about that. That's because they've spent their life blaming. So to actually look
So
at it
much easier.
and say it out loud, right?
So much
and I
easier.
mean, I've worked with people and said it's okay. They're not bad people. This is really about looking at the impacts. And in order to make the change, we have to become aware of the impacts.
Exactly.
Right.
You can't ignore it.
And I do think the reality is we need to cut ourselves some slack sometimes and understand we have what we have and we do the very best we can.
And each generation is slowly breaking down the traumas that don't work each generation.
Wow. Thank you. Oh, such great information. Well, Georgina, that's another episode of Georgina Life, a great show. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Thank you, lovely as always. And Georgina, we look forward to seeing you on the next Georgina Life. Bye-bye.